There is a weed growing in your backyard right now. You have probably pulled it out 100 times. You have probably sprayed it with herbicide, cursed at it, and tossed it in the trash without a second thought. It grows in your lawn, between the cracks in your driveway, along the edges of your garden beds, and in the footpaths around your home. It is so common, so ordinary, so completely unremarkable in appearance, that the entire modern world walks past it every single day without giving it a moment of attention. That weed is one of the most powerful natural antibacterial agents ever documented by modern science. It kills bacteria on contact, it draws infection out of wounds, it reduces inflammation faster than most over-the-counter treatments, it accelerates tissue healing at the cellular level. It has been used as medicine by Viking warriors, Native American healers, ancient Greek physicians, and Chinese medical practitioners for over 3,000 years across every major civilization on Earth. And it costs absolutely nothing because it is already growing in your yard, whether you want it there or not. The pharmaceutical industry has known about this plant for decades. Research institutions have studied its active compounds extensively. Medical literature going back centuries documents its effectiveness against bacterial infection, inflammation, and tissue damage. And yet the average American homeowner has no idea that the weed they pulled out of their lawn last Saturday afternoon was worth more to their family's health than half the products sitting in their medicine cabinet. I am going to tell you exactly what this weed is, what it contains, why it works, and how our ancestors used it for thousands of years before an industry decided that your ignorance was more profitable than your self-reliance. Welcome to the Ancient Prepper. If recovering forgotten knowledge that the modern world tried to bury is what brought you here, subscribe right now and ring that notification bell, because this channel exists for exactly one reason: to give back what was taken from you. The plant is called plantain, not the banana-like fruit you find in the grocery store. That is an entirely different organism that simply shares a name. This is Plantago major, a low-growing perennial herb with broad oval leaves, distinctive parallel veins running the length of each leaf, and a tough fibrous stem that makes it almost impossible to fully eradicate from any lawn or garden. If you have a yard, you have plantain. If you have a driveway with cracks in it, you have plantain growing in those cracks. If you have a footpath, a garden border, or any patch of disturbed soil anywhere near your home, plantain is almost certainly already there, waiting to be noticed. It is one of the most widely distributed plants on the entire planet. It grows across North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. It thrives in every climate zone from the Arctic tundra to tropical lowlands. It grows in poor soil, compacted soil, dry soil, and wet soil. It grows in full sun and deep shade. It is virtually indestructible, which is precisely why generations of homeowners have spent so much energy trying to get rid of it, and precisely why generations of healers before them never had to worry about running out of medicine. To understand why this plant has been valued as medicine across so many different civilizations over such an enormous span of human history, you need to understand what is actually inside it at the chemical level. Modern laboratory analysis has identified 3 primary active compounds in Plantago major that account for its remarkable medicinal properties. The first is aucubin, an iridoid glycoside that has been studied extensively for its antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. Research published in peer-reviewed microbiology literature has confirmed that aucubin demonstrates significant inhibitory activity against a broad spectrum of bacterial organisms, including some of the most common infection-causing bacteria that affect human tissue. The second compound is Allantoin, a naturally occurring chemical that promotes cell proliferation and tissue regeneration at the wound site. Allantoin is the reason plantain has been used for wound healing across so many cultures for so many centuries. It does not just kill the bacteria infecting a wound, it actively accelerates the growth of new healthy tissue to replace what was damaged. This compound is so well understood by modern science that it is now a standard ingredient in numerous commercial wound healing creams and skin repair products. The pharmaceutical industry extracted the compound, synthesized it in a laboratory, and sells it back to you in a tube for $15. The original source, free, growing in your backyard, producing allantoin in its leaves every single day, was never mentioned. The third compound is luteolin, a flavonoid with powerful anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties that has been studied for its ability to inhibit inflammatory pathways at the cellular level. Luteolin works alongside aucubin to reduce the swelling, redness, and heat that accompany bacterial infection and tissue damage, addressing the body's inflammatory response, while the antibacterial compounds work on the infection itself. Together, these 3 compounds create a complete medicinal profile that addresses bacterial infection, tissue inflammation, and wound healing simultaneously through a single plant that requires no cultivation, no purchase, and no pharmaceutical manufacturing process. Now let me take you back through history, because the story of how humanity discovered and used this plant across thousands of years and dozens of civilizations is one of the most remarkable threads in the entire history of medicine, and it is a story that the modern pharmaceutical industry has worked very hard to make sure you never hear. The earliest documented use of Plantago major as medicine comes from ancient China, where it appears in the Shenong Bencao Jing, the Divine Farmer's Classic of Materia Medica, one of the oldest medical texts in human history, compiled over 2,000 years ago. Chinese physicians prescribed plantain preparations for urinary tract infections, inflammation, respiratory infections, and wound treatment. They had identified through centuries of direct clinical observation that this plant reliably addressed bacterial infection and accelerated healing, long before the concept of bacteria had been articulated by Western science. Ancient Greek physicians documented plantain's medicinal use extensively. Dioscorides, the Greek physician whose work De Materia Medica served as the foundational medical reference text for over 1,500 years across the Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic medical traditions, described plantain as one of his most reliable treatments for wounds, ulcers, and infections. Galen, the Roman physician whose theories dominated Western medicine for over 1,000 years, prescribed plantain preparations for inflammatory conditions and bacterial skin infections. These were not folk remedies passed down through superstition. These were the considered clinical recommendations of the most sophisticated medical minds of the ancient world, based on centuries of accumulated observational evidence. The Vikings carried plantain with them on their voyages and military campaigns as a standard medical supply. Norse medical texts describe it as one of the 9 sacred healing herbs, valued specifically for its ability to treat infected wounds sustained in battle. When Viking explorers reached North America centuries before Columbus, they brought plantain seeds with them in their supplies. The plant took root in North American soil and spread so aggressively that Native American tribes, who had no prior knowledge of this plant, began incorporating it into their own medicinal traditions within generations of the first European contact. They called it white man's foot because it seemed to appear wherever Europeans had walked. Within a few centuries, it had become one of the most widely used medicinal plants in Native American healing traditions across the entire continent, adopted independently by dozens of tribes who recognized its effectiveness through their own direct experience. Medieval European herbalists listed plantain as an essential wound treatment. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century German abbess, whose medical writings are among the most detailed and sophisticated of the medieval period, wrote about plantain's ability to draw infection from wounds and reduce dangerous inflammation. English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper, writing in the 17th century, described plantain as one of the most universally useful plants in any healer's knowledge, available to the poorest person, growing freely everywhere, and effective against a remarkable range of conditions. Frontier American homesteaders used plantain as a primary first aid tool. On the frontier, far from any physician and with no access to a pharmacy, the ability to treat infected wounds, insect stings, snake bites, and skin infections with a plant growing underfoot was not a curiosity. It was survival. Women on the frontier knew to chew a fresh plantain leaf and apply the resulting poultice directly to a wound or sting. They knew to brew plantain tea for urinary tract infections and respiratory inflammation. They knew to pack fresh plantain leaves against infected cuts to draw the bacterial contamination out. This was not folk magic. This was 1,000 years of accumulated practical medical knowledge, passed down through direct experience and daily application. And then in the 20th century, something happened that broke that chain of transmission completely. The pharmaceutical industry grew. Antibiotics were developed and marketed as the universal solution to bacterial infection. Medical authority became increasingly centralized in licensed physicians and hospital systems. Folk medicine and herbal tradition were reclassified as primitive, unscientific, and potentially dangerous. The knowledge that grandmothers had passed to their daughters for 1,000 years was replaced by a system that required a prescription, a pharmacy visit, and a financial transaction for every medical need. This is not to say that modern medicine has no value. It has enormous value. But the systematic discrediting of plant-based traditional medicine served a very specific economic function. A plant that grows for free in every backyard in America and treats bacterial infection effectively generates zero pharmaceutical revenue. A 10-day course of prescription antibiotics generates revenue for the physician who prescribes it, the insurance system that processes it, and the pharmaceutical company that manufactures it. The economic incentive to replace free, effective traditional medicine with expensive proprietary treatments was not subtle, and the result was not accidental. The knowledge was not lost because plantain stopped working. The research confirms it still works. The compounds are still there, in every leaf, in every plant, in every backyard. The knowledge was lost because an industry discovered that your ignorance of what grows in your own yard was worth billions of dollars annually in pharmaceutical revenue, and invested accordingly in making sure that ignorance persisted. So here is exactly how to identify this plant correctly and how our ancestors used it, because correct identification is the foundation of everything else. Plantago major grows low to the ground in a rosette pattern, with leaves spreading outward from a central point at the base. The leaves are broad and oval, typically between 2 and 10 inches in length, depending on the growing conditions, with a distinctive pattern of parallel veins that run from the base to the tip of each leaf. If you pinch a leaf and pull it apart slowly, you will see tough fibrous strands, the veins stretching between the two pieces like thin threads. This is the most reliable identification feature of Plantago major. The flower stalks, when present, are slender upright spikes rising 4 to 12 inches above the leaf rosette, covered in tiny greenish flowers that produce small seeds. It has no thorns, no distinctive smell, and no irritating surface texture. Once you have correctly identified the plant, the fresh leaves are your primary medicinal tool. For wound treatment and bacterial infection on the skin surface, take 2 or 3 fresh leaves, wash them thoroughly with clean water, and either chew them briefly to break down the cell walls and release the active compounds, or crush them firmly between 2 clean stones or the back of a spoon. Apply the resulting paste directly to the wound, sting, or infected area, and cover with a clean cloth. Change the poultice every 2 to 4 hours. The aucubin will begin working against the bacterial contamination immediately, while the allantoin begins stimulating new tissue growth at the wound margin. For insect stings, specifically bee stings, wasp stings, ant bites, a fresh plantain poultice applied within minutes of the sting draws the venom and dramatically reduces swelling and pain within 15 to 20 minutes. This is one of the oldest and most reliable first aid applications of this plant across virtually every culture that has ever used it. For internal bacterial infections, urinary tract infections, respiratory infections, digestive inflammation, the traditional preparation is a simple tea. Take a generous handful of fresh plantain leaves, wash them thoroughly, and steep them in 1 cup of just boiled water for 10 to 15 minutes. Strain the leaves out and drink the liquid while warm. 2 to 3 cups daily was the standard dosage in traditional herbal medicine across multiple cultures. The anti-inflammatory and antibacterial compounds are water-soluble and transfer effectively into the tea preparation. For wound cleaning and antibacterial irrigation, a stronger plantain infusion made with 2 handfuls of leaves, steeped in 2 cups of hot water for 20 minutes, and allowed to cool, can be used to wash wounds directly, combining mechanical cleaning with the antibacterial properties of the plant compounds. One important note that needs to be stated clearly. If you are dealing with a serious infection, one that is spreading rapidly accompanied by high fever, showing red streaks extending from the wound site, or not improving within 48 hours, seek professional medical attention. Plantain is an extraordinary first-line treatment and a powerful preventative tool, but serious systemic infections require professional assessment. The goal of the ancient prepper is to give you knowledge that expands your self-reliance and fills the gaps that modern medicine leaves, not to replace professional care when professional care is genuinely necessary. Your ancestors did not walk past this plant without seeing it. They looked down at the crack in the path, at the weed pushing up through the garden border, at the broad-leafed rosette spreading across the lawn, and they saw medicine. They saw a first aid kit that replenished itself every season, asked for nothing, grew everywhere, and had been proven effective across more generations of human experience than any pharmaceutical trial could ever replicate. That knowledge did not disappear because the plant stopped working. The plant is still there, still producing aucubin, still producing allantoin, still producing luteolin, in every backyard, in every lawn crack, in every footpath and garden border across the country. The knowledge disappeared because an industry found a way to profit from the gap it left behind. And filling that gap, one forgotten plant, one buried technique, one suppressed piece of practical ancestral wisdom at a time, is exactly what the ancient prepper is here to do. Stop pulling this weed. Start learning what it can do. Because the most powerful medicine your family might ever need is already growing right outside your door, and it has been there the entire time. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs this knowledge right now, and stay with me because what is coming in the next video goes even deeper into what they buried.